It is day 65 of the US-Iran war, and the gap between Washington's version of events and the reality on the ground has rarely been wider. President Donald Trump has told Congress that hostilities against Iran have terminated. In a letter to lawmakers, he wrote, "The hostilities that began on February 28, 2026 have terminated. It is a legal and political move aimed at avoiding the war powers resolution whose 60-day deadline fell yesterday." But beyond the wording, the United States is still enforcing a heavy naval blockade. 45 commercial vessels have been turned back since April 13th. Fresh sanctions have been imposed on Iranian foreign exchange houses, and the shipping industry has been warned. Pay Iran for safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz and face UN sanctions. Meanwhile, Iran has sent a new peace proposal through Pakistani mediators. Trump has rejected it. Iran says there can be no talks under siege. Washington says the blockade will remain until nuclear terms are agreed. And in this deadlock, the global economy is facing what the International Energy Agency now calls the largest supply shock in history. Tonight, we look at a war that the administration says is over, but a crisis that is clearly deepening. The questions are urgent. Is this a real de-escalation or just a tactical pause? Has the balance of power in the region changed? And what happens now to international law, global institutions, and the economic security of millions far from the battlefield? All these questions and more will be put to my panel tonight on All 24 News Special. All right, let's bring in our guests to examine the legal and strategic, economic, and human dimensions of this conflict. We are joined by a panel of distinguished analysts from 4 continents. In Dhaka, Mr. Imran Hussain, a geopolitical researcher at the University of Dhaka, tracking the shift in regional balance. Hello there, sir, and thank you for agreeing to be with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me as well.
It's our pleasure. And in Beirut is Mr. Malek Jada, a journalist and geopolitical analyst, following the spillover into Lebanon and the growing human cost there. Hello, sir, and thank you for being with us.
Hello, Karim, and thank you for hosting me in your show.
Thank you. And also we're joined from London by Dr. Irfan Raja, media specialist and geopolitical analyst, focusing on Western double standards and the crisis of legitimacy in international law. Hello there, Professor. Good to see you.
Thank you so much. As always, my pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. And we're also joined from New York by Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi, a geopolitical analyst and a financial expert assessing the economic costs for American consumers, global energy markets, and the wider financial system. Hello there, Mohammed Chris Sassi. Thank you for being with us.
Good evening, Karim, and always a pleasure to be with you and your very, very honorable guest.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Chris Sassi. All right, let's start the conversation with you, Mr. Imran Hussain. Let me begin perhaps with the main diplomatic paradox. If we come to look at it, the Pakistan-mediated truce has now held for weeks, and Iran has sent a fresh proposal through Islamabad. President Donald Trump has rejected it, and at the same time, the U.S. keeps its naval blockade in place. Iran says it will not negotiate under siege, and Donald Trump says the hostilities are legally terminated. How do you see this? Do you see this as a real path to peace or as a tactical pause meant perhaps to run out the war powers clock and keep military pressure in place and let perhaps sanctions do the work?
Thank you so much once again, and very welcome to all other guests from Bangladesh as well. Well, coming to the point and directly your questions, and talking about the ceasefire and every discussions that took place in Pakistan, I personally don't think so that at the end of the day it will lead us eventually any sort of the reconciliation. So what it's leading towards or heading towards at the end of the day, it might be lead towards a protracted conflict, because it's more like, of course, I would say it's a tactical pause, because we are right now, the situations we are observing is the situations between the hot war and the cold war, you might say, because none of the parties want to, engage in some sort of the full-scale conflict, I would say, because the way Trump expecting Iran's response, of course, it is not possible from the Iran stage as well, because Iran has lost so many its important leaders, and it has eventually going through so many damages as well. So from that particular point, the way eventually Trump, expecting Iran's response at the end of the day, it will not put us any sort of the good positions, and it will not help us to arrive in a reconciliation as well, or some sort of the ceasefire even after the ceasefire as well. Now coming to the point, that is what we also need to take into our consideration is that I think it's a very important one, and somehow we are particularly missing it as well, because one of the most important demand that might also come from the US to arrive in some sort of the conciliation or reconciliation, you might say, after the ceasefire, that is Trump might demand to give up on the nuclear program strategy on the on Iran as well. But if I even ask you, and if I ask you each and everyone in the world right now, it's a very simple answer, and it's a very generating answer for which is generating naturally, is that Iran never going to give up on its nuclear program, because it's one of the most security tool that they are having, and from this security tool they are securitizing it, and conversely they are using the Speech Act, and from the Speech Act they are trying to make it the established of the non-entrepreneurship, and from this non-entrepreneurship, what you can see that actually they are trying to make a regional hegemonial influence, and at the end of the day, it's very much important one to sustain their regime and their survival and all other stuff. So at the end of the day, I would say two situations might take place in the coming days, even after the ceasefire, is that America might get tired of the war, and without achieving much, they might declare that it's okay, we have won the war. That is also quite equals with the Iran supreme leaders. Right now, the supreme leader is the Mustafa Khamenei, and US troops still will sustain into this region, and the sanctions will still will be there. And another things might take place, which of course I'll go for that, is that at the end of the day, Iran will gonna win, and of course I can sense it clearly, and the sanctions will be lifted from there. And one of the most important things is that Strait of the Hormuz, at the end of the day, that will be controlled by the Iran, of course. And again, US troops might, at the end of the day, leave the region, but there will be a perpetual touch with other things as well. So yeah, I can see that even after the ceasefire, I don't think so that at the end of the day it will lead to us any sort of a reconciliation. What might take place, it will, take us some sort of the protracted conflict. I'm not equating that at the end of the day it will, equals the same like the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but still it will have some certain of the, attributes from the Russia-Ukraine war as well.
Thank you,
that's
Mr. Hussain. Now let me bring Mr. Malik Jada to the conversation, but I want to move perhaps from the Strait of Hormuz to Lebanon, where the consequences of this war are being felt in lives, homes, and entire communities. More than 2,500 people have been actually killed by the Zionist strikes in Lebanon since March the 2nd. Hundreds of thousands have been displaced. Entire villages are being flattened. And Lebanon says the occupation is using the ceasefire as a cover to intensify the attacks. So from Beirut, Mr. Malik, how serious is the situation on the ground, and why do you think Lebanon's suffering has received so little attention from Western media and Western capitals?
Hello, Karim, and thank you for hosting me again. So first, let me say that despite the ceasefire agreement, the Israeli airstrikes have not stopped in South Lebanon. Every day, there are dozens of people killed, and the Israeli army is issuing evacuation orders in several villages. Israeli drones and warplanes are flying even over Beirut sometimes. And all in all, the violence is ongoing. Every hour we hear of new victims from Israeli airstrikes. 2 days ago, there was an Israeli airstrike that killed 8 people, and there are a lot of children and a lot of women getting killed. And I think that for the coming days and weeks, it also seems that the escalation will continue, and despite that, they still call it a ceasefire, although it's in the south, it's exactly the same way it was during the 40 days war that lasted from March 2 till April 16. So the difference that after April 16, the airstrikes were limited to South Lebanon. There were some occasional strikes in the Bekaa region, but in South Lebanon, it's on daily basis. So in the south, things did not really change after the ceasefire. And for your second question about the Western media, first of all, I think that Western media now is focused more on the US-Iran negotiations because this impacts in the internal situation of Western countries more than Israeli violation of the ceasefire, because it impacts the price of oil, which is actually impacting every country around the world, including the US, including Western countries. As for Washington, I think it goes against the interest of the US to basically say that the ceasefire that followed the Israeli-Lebanese negotiations in Washington is not working properly, since the agreement actually came immediately after the Lebanese and Israeli officials met in Washington.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Malik Jada. Now let me bring in Dr. Irfan Raja to the conversation. Dr. Raja, I want to turn to the legal framework that has governed the world since 1945 and ask whether the war has actually shattered it. We see more than 100 US-based international law scholars have said the campaign is a clear violation of the UN Charter. UN experts as well have called the war entirely illegal. The German president has called it a violation of international law as well. France has also expressed deep concern. Why has this war triggered such a crisis of legitimacy for the Western-led legal order? And are we seeing the UN Charter becoming functionally irrelevant? And if so, what does that mean for global stability?
Thank you very much. Very important question at this point of time in history. Do you see, just to begin with these phrases, for example, when we use the rules-based international order. So a Bloomberg columnist, Andreas Kloot, has called it linguistic atrocity, meaning that these all phrases and institutions have lost currency, and it's time to rethink. And you have put it rightly that looking back since the Gulf War, first Gulf War and the second Gulf War, and the later, beginnings from the weapons of mass destruction. So the Western media, alongside the politicians in America and their allies in the Western capitals, they always, of course, on behalf of Israel. In the Middle East, every war is part of the Greater Israel Project. This is very important to learn this. So, and they always start a new war, illegitimate, illegal wars, just to cover up the existing wars. So as you see, like you mentioned in your opening, like the UN has lost its credibility, because since we have seen the start of since the October 2023 Gaza genocide, which including the leading Jewish professors, critics, they have called it a Holocaust. But the moment people speak up the truth, they either lose their job or they are being reduced to nobody. So all these things, how many times the UN has, which has been clearly set up, established to enhance peace. But there's no peace, because each time there is anything to protect the rights, fundamental human rights of people suffering in Gaza, living in open-air concentration camps. What happened is, we have seen over and over, time and time again, the one country, America, is shielding Israel through offering vetoes. So to cut it short, in brief, now you have seen so many times This is regularly happening in case of many wars that America has waged on different countries, particularly in Middle East, on the pretext of democracy, fundamental human rights. Just hours ago, before you start your show, even the Al Jazeera have published a picture on their main news website. Is to do with the people, some Iranians who are definitely on, immigration in France. They are protesting and saying we need freedom. Well, the Professor Noam Chomsky has already mentioned that these overall, you're right to say, the UN has lost, and that's why it's a battle between global South and the West. And the last thing is, yes, everybody is asking for an alternative, and these calls for an alternative are coming louder and louder. Like Trump himself said that there would be a board of peace. So that's another very clever, skillful move towards, setting up an alternative for the UN, which will not happen.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Now let's perhaps turn to the economic aspect. And here, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, we might need to look at some numbers. The War Secretary, Pete Hegseth, has told Congress the war has cost about 25 billion US dollars. But other estimates actually suggest the real figure could be far higher once damage to US bases and air defense systems is actually included. And at the same time, US missile stockpiles have been heavily depleted. Rebuilding them perhaps could take years. Now, how do you reconcile the administration's claim of a limited and terminated operations with these figures? And can America's war industry sustain this pace if the crisis continues?
Well, Karim, your questions are all linked by one core question. The policymakers are saying to frame a contained military action on one side, while markets are pricing in a systematic, open-handed shock. These two narratives, as you illustrated, can coexist politically, but not indefinitely economic reality. When you said that, is limited or terminated against escalating cost, the short answer is they don't reconcile. Even if an operation is described as limited, the economic footprint depends on second-order effect, which means especially energy and shipping. What we are seeing now is those second-order effects are not limited. You have the distribution around the Sinai, the Strait of Hormuz, that have been described as the larger oil supply shock in history. You name it in your opening statement. Then you have the energy price are projected to surge. Now the barrel last week was about $120, when before the aggression of Israeli and USA against Iran, everything was fine. Now the market are already reacting as this is a prolonged distribution and is not a one-off strike, as I said. So the contradiction exists because military operation is episodic or targeted. We have economically supply chain react as if the risk is persistent, and that gap is exactly what drives volatility in the market. As to answer your question, can the US defense industrial base sustain this peace? The short term is yes. As you said, you give the number, as the Ministry of War was saying last week during his interrogation in between quote in front of the Congress, and he was not capable explaining how the numbers come and where did they get them. But in a short answer, the US defense sector has deep capacity, but three constants matter. The first one is the stockpile depletion rate, specifically on the munition. The second one is the production bottleneck. We cannot produce all the armament overnight. And this war has been going on for 2 months, more than 2 months now. And you have the front in America, but also America is supplying the arm to Ukraine, and is also a tremendous amount. So that is a problem. And of course, you have the budget politics that we named. So, as I said, the recent conflict, Ukraine, Gaza, now Iran is related to this escalation. And it's already stretching the inventory of the armament. The scaling production is not like flipping a switch, as I was saying. It can take between 12 and 36 months to expand. So if the crisis persists, the US cannot sustain operation, but is likely required supplemental expanding plus an industrial ramp-up. And this is how we are heading toward the 1970 steel stagflation. This is not longer a French scenario. It's explicitly been flagged by economists all over the world. And, the key parallel to 1970 is the oil shock, as I said, is the policy dilemma, and is the mechanical stagflation about the surge. So right now, what you are doing, we are, how can I say, the growth forecast, you have to see the IMF and the Mondial Bank, and bien sûr, of course, the agreement in place. Whatever is going to do depend on the duration of the blockade, and whenever energy flows normalize. Now, like the United Arab Emirates, they find other route to avoid the Strait of Hormuz, as well as Saudi Arabia is finding another, but is not going to supply all the energy needed by the demand in the world. So you told me about the global financial system is more fragile than in 2010. Of course, we cannot capitalize as the demand is so huge. And this is why the Ministry of War have some difficulties to put these numbers together.
Let's dive into these kind of details a little later, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi. And let me bring back now Mr. Imran Hussein. Mr. Imran, let's turn perhaps to the constitutional issue in the United States, because actually there is a major threshold for American war powers, because under the 1973 War Powers Resolution, the 60-day deadline for authorization actually fell yesterday, and the administration says the ceasefire pauses the clock. Legal experts strongly reject that view, however. But then Congress has not authorized the war, and there is still no plan to do so. Now, is the War Powers Resolution now effectively dead in light of what is happening? And if a president can declare a war terminated while still enforcing a blockade and maintaining a large military presence, what precedent does that set, actually?
Thank you so much once again for coming back to me. Well, coming to the point directly to your questions, let's put it this way, that is, I wouldn't say that is not effectively dead, but if you want to make it effective, by the time you need to have a proper will and aim, along with you have to come up with a pragmatic solution as well, otherwise not. Because going to the previous discussions, once again, Trump need to be patient here. Trump need to make sure that he's not unpredictable one. He needs to lower his expectations. Coming to the point, that is, they need to see it once again with a perpetual thought of making reconciliation. But this time they need to see to it along with other regional power as well, because the war that has been taking place, it's not about only US, it's not about only Iran and in between Israel as well. It's also about other countries, because you have seen the recent deal, US all about, that talking or particularly, looking for the, sales agreement, arms sales agreement and all other issues. So you have to see it once again with a perpetual thought that you want to really make a reconciliation. Coming to the point again, we need to remember that whatever the things and whatever the statements that in particular coming and generating from other side or from both sides, at the end of the day, no matter what, it should be matched with US grand strategy or US MAGA policy as well, or the nationalist approach that we have seen in Trump's speech. Otherwise, I don't think so that it will be possible to be effectively implement it or not. And again, while we're talking about only US's interest, we are talking about in everything, I think we are not looking into the Iran's internal issue as well. So there are two groups into the Iran, if I'm not wrong, which is called the principalist, and another was called the pragmatist. So the principalists are the people who are very much aligned with the 1979 revelations, and they of course entirely against with the West and US in particular, and of course you say Israel as well, and they don't want to negotiate. But there are the other group which is you might call the pragmatist. So these are the people which is also in a but they really want to discuss, they really want to negotiate, but because of the pressure from the hardline, I really don't think so that is at the end of the day whether it will be possible or not. So both sides eventually need to a pragmatic solution. But again, here's my point is whenever it comes to the point of date and surviving for the Iran, whether it's really make a space for the negotiations or not, that is always a issue, and that is always a question. That always remains this question. So when it comes to surviving in between date and life, by the time how much it will be effective to implement it and or not. Coming to the point regarding the president, how it's going to be said, it is a very simple. We know pretty well Trump is a very much hawkish one, and he's very much unpredictable one, because what he's stating today, it may not be implemented in the next day morning. So it's quite right now you can everybody can easily assume it. So there will be no trust in the coming days, not only for this reason but also for other reason. For instance, we can say you has already been detached from them, and we have seen them that tradition are also getting detached from them. Coming to the point, this will also make a barrier for the mutual reconciliation as well, and again effective powers war resolutions as well. So these might also lead them in the coming days or in the future into isolation as well. The practice or the attributes we have seen for the US, that is to be a benign hegemon after the Second World War, or around, if I say very precisely, around 1945 or 1947, it will be it is right now transforming itself into a coercive hegemon. So in the next days, even if any president comes, because of the Trump second administration, it will be very tough for them to retype the image once again to be a benign hegemon, no matter what, because countries right now try to form their distinct community and the distinct identity. If you talk about EU, if you talk about China, EU also focusing on the security strategy, because Trump has clearly mentioned that they need to figure out another new shoulder. If you talk about the China is still focusing on the new liberal policy as well. And if you talk about the global South being a part of it and the South Asian part of it, they try to make a balance in between this and or among this. So at the end of the day, nobody wants to be with a president who is a very much unpredictable one. If I say very precisely, with a country who is not sure about its grand strategy, that what it really wants to do in the coming days. So this will not only harming the president image, and also it's going to harm the future's images as well, along with its country, along with its grand strategy as well. So it's going to be a terrible one, which will be contribute to the decline of the international legal order at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Imran Hussein. And now let me get back to Mr. Malik Jada. Mr. Malik Jada, there is a growing view in diplomatic circles that this war serves Israeli strategic interests more than the American ones. Many, actually, former US officials have said Netanyahu pushed Donald Trump to launch the war. And Netanyahu has said he wants to change the face of the Middle East. At the same time, we see the Zionist strikes continue pounding in Lebanon, while Washington has actually cleared billions in military sales to regional actors. Can it credibly be argued that the United States is now fighting a war that serves Israel's agenda more than its own? And what is the mood on the Arab street from what you're gathering?
Yes, so first of all, I think that it's clear since the beginning of the war on February 28th that the United States put Israel's interest as a priority. I think that Iran, even before the war, did not pose that much of a threat to the United States. So the United States was for sure doing this and launching this war for the sake of Israel's interest. And I think even in the US itself, people are now, American citizens are now realizing that the United States are actually doing this for Israel. And I think that Israel has been pushing for this war for a long time, since the war in Gaza, and Israeli officials, we were listening to them say that we want to change, like you said, we want to change the face of the Middle East. And then they moved from one country to another, from Gaza to Lebanon. And then we saw the war last year in Iran, the 12 days war. And since the end of this war, Israel was always hinting that that they would carry out another war, so that they would, in order to achieve their goals of ending Iran's ballistic missiles, as well as its proxies, and at the same time, its enriched uranium. So I think that what you're saying is true, that it is for Israel's interest. As for second question, the mood on the street. So of course, in countries like Lebanon, with airstrikes targeting villages every day under a U.S. Green light. So of course, in these targeted places, every day that goes with these strikes targeting, there's even more anti-U.S., anti-Israel sentiments growing. And for the rest of the country, I think that everyone wants an end to the war, whereas whether people are directly targeted from these strikes or not, it's a common goal here in Lebanon. And I think if we're talking about the Arab population in general, even in the Khalij and in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia, everyone wants an end to the war because it's impacting the economy. And if Iran also strikes again the Gulf, it also poses a security risk, and the prices of oil and gas would increase. So ending the war is basically a common goal between an end to the Israeli-American war is a common goal to all the Arab people in the region.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Malik Jala. And now let me bring back Dr. Ifan Raja. Dr. Ifan Raja, there is a contradiction, as we have heard. This contradiction, many in the global south are actually noticing and condemning. The U.S., on the one hand, is sanctioning Chinese oil terminals and Iranian exchange firms. It is threatening sanctions on shipping companies that pay round tolls. Yet, at the same time, it is arming regional actors and enforcing a blockade that many legal scholars say violates the international law, as we talked earlier. So is this really a rules-based order? Is it a system where the rules are applied selectively to punish some and arm others? How do you see it?
Well, again, a very important point. It is, of course, they are punishing the Iranians or attempting to punish. In fact, they already have lost the war. I would just quickly add something. This war is like an onion layers. So in the first layer, you see it's a war between America and the rest in technology as well. You see NATO is, departing, and there's more concerns among Western countries, because at first the Western technology was being, defeated in a recent last year's conflict between India and Pakistan, when the Pakistanis shot down a French Rafale. And here you see F-35 and the most modern, jets and other equipments, the defense, air defense systems, so are not working at all in case of Israel. So you see that this is first. The second point is you're right, because the global south has already learned this. This is not the first war, and I repeatedly say this is one of the many wars which are about to come. And you and I will, at some point, witness. Although we are here to campaign for peace, we are always standing with the peace journalism. But the point is, this Greater Israel project is behind all those wars, behind weapons of mass destruction. There was no weapons of mass destruction at all. At that time, the Russians were weak, but they were realizing and they were telling the world, but nobody was listening because everything was skillfully manufactured. So once again, there are another calls, very louder points coming into TV talk shows and in media that the Netanyahu is next target, and they are openly saying his team next target is Turkey, then Egypt, and taking part of Jordan and Saudi Arabia, and finally the Pakistan. So the Pakistanis know this, the Chinese and the Russians know this. This time Chinese are very strong, so they already have defeated the technology. Now you see another reason is the negotiations failed because there are from American side there are all property dealers who are on negotiation table, and none of the political elected people by the people, they are not there. So the whole point is this is very cleverly, skillfully designed because their aim is to extend this war. However, from the Iranian side, all those people were peacemakers. They were loving peace, and they were there with full, intent to talk, discuss, and coming to a point for peace. But unfortunately, every time they went there were assassination. And recently, as I already mentioned in your last program, there was the false flag operations. You don't need to be Einstein or super genius to understand this, because this is what Americans and Israelis are doing since for the long, long time in the Middle East and elsewhere. So you're very right. In brief, to summing up this, now this time the global South, particularly the countries like Russia and China, they are powerful, and they have realized that you are taking oil forcefully from Venezuela using words and phrases, through media narratives and telling the public. We are entering into a very crucial stage because Britain is going to local elections next week, and the predictions already are that the sitting prime minister and his party, they are losing Wales and other areas. Similarly, that's what the midterm elections in America and all that. So, and the rising young people, which the mainstream media in the West are not showing to the public, is that a lot of young Israelis, they are unhappy about these wars, because one after the another these wars. So we are come to a point there that ordinary people are rising up in all countries, including Israel, America, and the Western capitals. And you're right once again that the game is nearly over, because this time the Chinese and Russians, along with other countries in the global South and some partners in the West, they don't want this war because it is affecting us all.
Perfect. Let me now turn to the economic side again with Mr. Mohammed Krissasi. Mr. Mohammed Krissasi, earlier you did mention that the World Bank is projecting higher energy prices, higher fertilizer prices, and stronger pressure on global commodities. You spoke also about the Brent crude that has actually surged sharply since the start of the war. Now, in the US, let's focus a little bit. The gasoline, diesel, shipping, and consumer prices have all moved higher. So you mentioned a little part about stagflation earlier. So are we really heading toward that kind of stagflation scenario like the 1970s? And could the economic fallout from this war shape the 2026 midterms before any military outcome is reached?
Well, as you just illustrated, we are talking about a global war that was initiated, and I would like to, my dear colleague, that again and again when we talk about the Iran-USA war, is not Iran-USA war, is Iran against GCC, against Israel, and against the United States of America. All this was initiated again and again by Israel, and I would like to enhance and insist that we don't have to hide, we cannot hide the forest with the tree. Israel is the main culprit here. But now we are talking, the question you're asking me about, the repercussion of this war. I would like to say a word about the cost of the war. The cost of the war, if you mean the cost of the war so far, it depends on what layer you are looking at. Military spending, economical damage, and global spillover, as one of the participants was saying so eloquently. This number can look very different. If you take only the direct military cost of the US, for a limited operation, was supposed to be a limited operation, you have now the burn rate is still high. Air naval operation, precision munition, as I was saying before, the logistic deployment, and all this costs again and again between 5 and 15 billion already committed to do what Israeli want US to do and pay for it. And then again, the scale toward 10 of billion annually. I don't know that we are taking the importance of this number because the damage, yes, the gas pump is $5 instead of $4. The inflation, all this is the cycle of economy. But you never have such spending by the military. That's one of the problems. Again and again, and I said many times on this show, America, if it was only about the oil, is not a problem. America export oil, doesn't import it. But because of the global trade and all this ramification, is like you have an octopus with 8 branches, and it's going all over the world. And this, the economical cost, this is why aware also that is going to explode. The real cost is not limited to the bomb or the disruption because of the Strait of Hormuz. We have all this oil spike, we have the shipping insurance, we have the global trade show, as you already stated at the beginning of your introduction. And all this, you have the energy price shock that I was saying, an increase between 20 and 25%, from $4 to $5 here in America. The global growth, of course, is not the same now. We have a percentage of the GDP that is enormous, and we have the global economic drag, potentially hundreds of billions to continue this war. And then, of course, the causality of all this economically, the market and the financial cost. The market start pricing risk immediately because the risk country is there. Mm-hmm. And look at the bond of America, for example, if you look at the market, the currency of America, if you look at the market, even without a crash, we always have this wealth destruction. It's the life of the economy. But here, with 100 of billion, and now it's going to be trillion, who is going to pay right now for that? You have the energy important country, you have the consumer worldwide, you have the government that cannot talk on the same level, on the same line about the same sugar. And of course, lately, now we feel it with the industry like the airline and the shipping. And the key point, and I will conclude that, the key point is that the cost remains in the hundreds of billions globally. And it's disrupted and it's dragged for months, then we are going to wake up and smell the coffee. And we are going to have a trillion in cumulative economical impact. If you want, I can break it down into a simple payday. And if you allow me, if not, I'll give you back.
Yes, Mr. Mohammed Christmas, actually, we have only 10 minutes left, and we need to divide this time evenly by every single one of you, since we are dealing with the last questions for Mr. Imran Hussein. Briefly, the point I want to put you actually to a bigger strategic question. Many analysts now speak of strategic insolvency as U.S. missile stocks actually are falling and military assets are shifted away from the Indo-Pacific, and NATO looks increasingly divided. At the same time, you have China managing the crisis more carefully and is presenting itself as a defender of restraint and international law. So the question goes like this: are we witnessing the end of the post-Cold War unipolar moment? And does the Global South now feel less pressure to choose sides in a war that serves neither its security nor its economy? But briefly, please.
Thank you so much once again for coming back to me. I'll try to make it short as early as possible. Well, I don't think so that it is always trigger a question that is what that after the post-Cold War or the end of particularly unipolarity, whether we're witnessing or not, because with the Trump second administration, we have already witnessed that is the final blow of it, of course, already done. And the countries, of course, looking for the distinct identity. Let's talk about EU. EU also looking for its own security. And if you talk about particularly China, China is, of course, still focusing on the new liberal policy by focusing on the global South diplomacy. And if you talk about the global South and Asian countries as well, they are trying to make a balance. So I don't think so that it's once again, unipolarity still exists anymore. I would say it's more about the non-polarity. It's all about non-polarity. I try to mean that if your interest matches, by the time I can work with you. If your interest doesn't match with me, by that time I'm not going to work with you. So that's the particularly fact. And coming to the point, because of the time shortage, I would like to conclude it here. That is, yeah, of course, global South facing a pressure, but in a pressure, I would say from the economic side. Let's talk about from a very much pragmatic point. Right now, maybe the Middle East is a center, so they are attacking there. So what if, and then what's the possibility that these, being a coercive one, they will not going to attack me. They're not going to attack the Asian country at the end of the day, because we also got the Indo-Pacific. So it's also strategic correlational stage and the strategic hub as well. So they might go for they might come for their interest as well. So yeah, they are also facing challenges there, but they are not facing the pressure. Still, right now, they are not facing pressure that much, if I can say, from my country's perspective as well. But yeah, there is some tendency to take side because of the powerful country, because of the, sharing some sort of the diplomatic relation, I would say. But I think the countries from the global South, they try to come up with much more realizations and not focusing on the other strategical interests that should focus on the humanitarian perspective, because we know pretty well right now there is no law exists. The so-called international law, the so-called international liberal order, it's not exactly exist. If it used to be exist, the atrocity that had been taking place, it wouldn't be taking place. So they should come up with a much more meaningful, pragmatic realization based on humanitarian perspective, rather than the interpretative perspective that is so-called generated from based on international law or some other stuff. So I hope that's clear. So let's conclude it here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Imran Hussein. Of course, we have very little time left, and here let me put this question to you, Dr. Irfan Raja. But maybe the issue that I want to focus on is the reshaping of the Western alliance itself. For example, the Pentagon has announced troop withdrawals from Germany. There are also reports of internal discussions about punishing allies seen as insufficiently supportive. Donald Trump has threatened trade measures against Spain and floated further reductions elsewhere. So what message, I'm saying, does this actually send to Moscow and Beijing about the reliability of the U.S. security umbrella? And is NATO now more fractured than at any time in its history?
Well, let's start with the NATO. I don't think so. NATO's story is finished completely, or it has become irrelevant completely. But it's right to say that there are fractions among Western countries. And as I said, these countries are very much under pressure from the masses who are demanding peace, because one war after the other war, this the public has seen all these wars are manufactured, crafted, and it was like, there's little money for people, ordinary people. There's a homeless crisis, there's cost of living crisis. The ordinary people are suffering. So in that perspective, the Western countries are very under pressure, and they are rethinking their policies. So you are right to say NATO is fractured, and for other reasons as well. We don't have enough time to discuss that. And yeah, when it comes to U.S. Trust, they already lost the trust. We have discussed several times, and I don't think so. They are in a position to very briefly reassure other countries, particularly China and Russia, that they are coming back. So there is a crisis of trust.
Okay, Mr. Mohammed Krisasi, very quickly, you have 1 minute. Tell me, on the economic side, we have discussed that a lot of prices are going up. So is the global financial system now more vulnerable to a systematic shock than it was in 2008? And if this blockade has lasted for months, who's really carrying the risk and who pays really the final bill?
Well, so far, the final consumer that are paying the bill are the American citizens. That's the thing that you have to keep in mind. Now, I don't think America can sustain this for long, as I said, and is going to be election in mid-November. And regarding the trade by nature is going to go back on the right track. You have always 1929, you have 1954, you have 2002, 2008. Economically, the trade will always find a balance because this is the nature of the economy. Now, the problem what you are facing is this global trade war. And that, I don't think we are going to see the hand of it so soon, unfortunately, I should say.
Thank you. And just a final word for Mr. Malik Jada. I want to close your part of the discussion with the human dimension. As we have seen, a lot of thousands have been killed in Iran, including many civilians. Schools and hospitals have been hit. In Lebanon, the death toll is high and displacement is massive. And across the Gulf countries that actually tried to prevent this war are also paying the price, and let alone what happened in Gaza. So who is really bearing the real cost of this conflict, and can ordinary people in Iran, in Lebanon, in Gaza and the wider region emerge from this as anything other than the main victims?
Yes, it's very clear that the civilians, the people who have nothing to do with all of this, are the main victims. In Lebanon, more than 2,500 have been killed, and the numbers are growing every day. We should not also forget all the displaced people. When the war started, more than 1 million people were displaced, and a lot of them are still displaced because of the instability. A lot of people are still living in tents with basic needs not met. And in Iran also, a lot of people were killed, a lot of civilians, the same for Gaza before. So it's very clear that civilians are always paying the price of these wars, even if they have nothing to do with everything that's happening.
Thank you so much for all those insights. Gentlemen, we must actually leave it there. My thanks to Imran Hussein in Dhaka, Malik Jada in Beirut, Dr. Irfan Raja in London, and Mohammed Krisasi in New York.
Thank you so much.
So after
You're
64 days, thank you, Mr. Mohammed Sasi. And after 65 days, actually, the picture is quite stark. A war declared terminated in a letter to lawmakers, yet unresolved in every serious sense. A blockade squeezing global commerce, an international legal order under strain, and a public in the United States turning against this conflict. Allies being pressured and punished, and ordinary people across Iran, Lebanon, the Gulf countries, Palestine, and beyond paying the price in blood, hardship, and lost futures. And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we come to a close. Thank you for watching, and until next time, have a good one.